welcome back to Overseas Auto Reviews. Today I have the brand new G87 BMW M2 lent to me by my good friend. I'll have his Instagram up over here. This one is finished specifically in Toronto red and has the beautiful M wheels in black. Now, let me explain to you why I'd take this over a BMW M4 competition. Without further ado, let's break this vehicle down and complete a review. Now, this is the refreshed body style for the BMW M2. This is the G87 chassis, whereas the previous generation was the F87. Now, technically this is a non-competition BMW M2, but the previous generation's BMW M2 competition differed from the base, unlike this generation. So let me explain that a little bit further. This is a BMW M2 base, the G87 generation. The M2 base on the F87 generation differed from the M2 F87 competition because it had different motors. The F87 M2 used BMW's N55 motor, whereas the F87 BMW M2 competition used BMW's S55 motor, which was the same motor they were using in the M3s and the M4s at the time as well. The N55 was the motor used in their road-going cars with the 35i designation. Now, unlike that previous generation, this generation is different. This uses the S58 motor that is also used in the M3 and M4, both non-competition and competition. So this generation of M2 also gets the same true M designation with its motor, because a lot of people believe that the previous generation M2 base wasn't a real M because it didn't have an M engine. Now, up front, you can see the revised boxy style, which has a lot of controversy surrounding it in this vehicle. That's because it's a big change from what the previous generation M2 used to be, and personally, I think I like this a little bit more, at least on the front end. The previous generation's rear end was just perfection. A little bit more aggressive in the boxiness of the headlights, unlike the previous generation. We also get the mustache-styled front grille, which I have grown to like quite a bit. We have that classic BMW hood that was pronounced mainly in the E92 M3, showing that like bulge in the hood, which I do quite like. The lower portions are finished in black, same with the grille inserts, and they have the M2 badge in the front as well. Behind this grille, you can see the fat intercooler and radiator, which is something I like to see in a car from the factory. We also have parking sensors, which is important in a vehicle like this. You want to know where all your surroundings are when you are parking, so I'd say that's a good thing. Underneath the hood of the BMW M2, you're going to find the twin turbocharged S58 3-liter inline-6 motor. This motor produces 453 horsepower and 406 pound-feet of torque, connected to a ZF 8-speed torque converter automatic transmission and a rear-wheel drive drivetrain, which rockets the car up to 60 miles an hour in about 3.9 seconds. We also have front strut bars, which are great, provides chassis rigidity for lateral G-force and managing that a little bit better. Here we are at the wheels for the BMW M2. These are 275s by 19s up in the front. You're going to get 285s by 20 in the back, which means this is a staggered setup. From factory, we're running Pirelli tires, which is great. You're definitely going to need these on a car like this. I can't remember the exact name or style of these specific wheels, but I'll pull them up on the screen. You can see that they're backed by M-branded brake calipers and a really large brake disc as well, which is great. This car handles corners really, really well. It's almost like it's stuck to the road. It's like an Audi TT if it was made by BMW and it was rear-wheel drive. It's just a go-kart. Now, the side of the car is where a lot of its hate came from initially, but I think that just like more modern BMW designs, the design grew on a lot of people. I really like the boxy appeal. I think going away from the sharp edges and cut corners of the F87 into this G87, this is a nice step forward, unlike what they initially did with the G80 and G82. Now, I'm not going to speak more on that. This front end is a lot more beautiful than a pig nose. And we can see the longer hood in the front in comparison to the rest of the body. The A-pillar moves seamlessly into the B-pillar, swaps really nicely, and has a short little trunk in the back. You can see really wide rear fenders, which is how you can tell this apart from an M240i, which is the B58 variant of this car. So essentially, you can think of the M240i as the previous generation M2 base, whereas this as the previous generation's M2 competition, even though this isn't the current generation M2 competition, but that's the whole debacle. You also get M mirror caps, which are always nice. This is to deflect air in a way so that if you have the window rolled down, you won't get this buffeting and bassy noise in the cabin, which is always great. We have a really well and widely pronounced side skirt, which is wider in the front, tapers in at the rear, which I like quite a bit. Moving into this negative offset test, we can see that there is a little bit of camber and they're sticking out a relatively good amount. Nothing like Mercedes where they had to add the extra flap, but I mean, that's okay. The negative offset is great on these. I wouldn't suggest anything more than a 10mm spacer if you do plan on spacing your wheels out a little bit from factory. We also do get keyless entry, so if I had my keys in my pocket, I just open the door and close it like so, and I'd tap that, but the keys are actually inside the car, so I don't want to lock myself out. We also get the carbon fiber roof with the BMW M2. This helps with structural rigidity and just looks really good, although you can't get a sunroof if you get this. Here we are at the rear end of the G87 M2. You can see the more boxy look of this car, as well as the more widely pronounced rear fenders. These are, I believe, up to around 2.5 to 3 inches wider than the M240i. We'll have to double check that and put it on the screen. You can also see that this brand new taillight design, this is redesigned. A lot of people didn't like this design, but it's really grown on me, and I think it suits the rest of the car as well. I also don't think pictures do this car justice. I think that in person, this car looks about 10 times better, just like the C8 Corvette was, especially in Toronto red. You can see the lower portion of the bumper, really similar to how the previous generation F87 M2 was, except we get more reflectors in the back with black inserts and a parking sensor, lowering into the signature BMW M Motorsport design of the quad tips in a dual exit setup. Beautiful exhaust tips and a beautiful noise that comes out of them as well. We have the BMW logo in the center and the M2 logo on the right. Popping the trunk, we get an electronically unlatching system, but it doesn't electronically open. This also doesn't electronically close. BMW also knows that this is indeed a BMW M, so we have the BMW roadside assistance number pasted inside the trunk. Conducting a trunk test. I'm going to see the best way to get inside this. I indeed fit. The trunk would close, but it's 100 degrees out and I don't want to suffocate. That is a trunk test pass. All right, now let's climb into the back seats of the BMW M2, because this does indeed have 4 seats. Now, getting in is a little bit trickier, but when we do the job, we do the job. You can also see the carbon back bucket seats. Beautiful seats. The greatest speccable option in existence. You must get these seats if you get this car. That's a deal breaker at this point. You can also see that when I put the seat back, electronically scoots backwards. I thought my shins were gonna get cut off, but they didn't. This is an electronic, kind of like electronically activated lever with the BMW M Motorsport stitching on it, just like the seat belts right over here. Now, sitting in the back of this, we have the same amount of space as we did in the F87 M2. I've spent a relatively good amount of time in a BMW M2 from the last generation, and I can say that the comfort, the space, and just overall the quality as well is the same as we did see in the previous generation, and that's not a bad thing. The previous generation M2 was a great two-door sports car with rear seats because they're actually usable. I've been with 4 adults in a BMW M2 from the last generation. It fits 4 people, no problem, and it fits them comfortably. I'm 5'10", I'm seated quite happily, although my head does touch the top of the ceiling when I stretch my back out a little bit. We have a single cubby over here, and that's about it. We also do have speakers though, that's good. We have 2 subwoofers in the back, which is great. Take a look at the carbon bucket seats. Now getting in, you're gonna hurt your butt and your thigh a little bit because these bolsters are extremely aggressive. I have larger thighs for my proportions as a man, but if you do have a lot bigger thighs, then this might be a little bit of a hassle for you. Now, in terms of the side support, those are adjustable with a button right over here. You can either decrease their intensity or increase them, and let's see how far it goes. This is like, it's a nice little hug, but the BMW M2 is hugging me at this moment, which is nice because I don't get many of those. Anyways, sorry about that. I just had to throw that in. I couldn't give up that opportunity. In terms of seating position, you're on the floor. It does go up a little bit, but not as much as I was hoping. But it's not something that I could complain about necessarily. So in terms of seating position, this is great. I can see over the hood, even though the bulge is pretty intense. Steering wheel position is perfect. Obviously, this is set to my friend's driving position. I don't want to mess this up too much, but steering wheel position is great. Super thick and meaty wheel, which I love. If you watch my review on the RS5, then you know really well that I love these fat, thick steering wheels. This is matte. It should be matte. Once it's all glossy, you gotta wash your wheel. That's just how it is. We have the M1 and M2 button as well, but I'll show you that once you climb inside as well. Alright, here we are on the inside of the M2. You can see the steering wheel right over here, really wide. We have the M1 button and the M2 button. They're both customizable. This is like a lower sport driving setting, but this is like all the beans. We can also see our wiper settings right over there. This screen controls some of these settings on the right, just like your volume, and the cruise control settings right over here, controlling your cruise control. We also have the center of the steering wheel, which has been changed, almost like the M8. One thing that's interesting to me is that this is not a flat bottom steering wheel, but I'm not going to complain about that whatsoever. We also have the leather wrapped airbag cover, which I like a lot. We also have some of our light settings over there. We have the M stripes on the door. I love this. We also have our mirror settings over there and the door handle right over here. You can see the BMW infotainment system works absolutely beautifully. I have no complaints with this whatsoever. 200 miles an hour on the dash, red line at around 7,500. Also tells you which seats are unbuckled. Going into the BMW infotainment system, we're currently in the climate controls. If I press the home button, it takes me to the home. You can see that I have all of my navigation settings, my Bluetooth settings, and then we come down into the music settings. I can click this with the scrolling bar and connect a phone or listen to the radio, but who wants to do that? Call buttons and the navigation. If I expand this, you can see the large and wide screen. Moving away from this, because there aren't really many performance pages, we can see performance options. However, traction control off. You're gonna want to stay away from that if you haven't driven a rear-wheel drive vehicle, because these vehicles get really tail happy really quickly. I want to see if this has the BMW what's it called, drift control. It does not, but that's okay. We also have the we do have the BMW drift analyzer. You can see that we have the traction control level, the duration of the drift angle, the distance we drifted, and it rates it out of 5. Unfortunately, I don't want to test this because there are 112 miles on the dashboard of this thing. Also, if you are hearing wind in the microphone, I do apologize about that. Moving into the M lap timer, we have all of these lap time informations, but since I'm not on a track, it won't let me go into that option. We also have Apple CarPlay, which is a perfect feature. Interior lighting, we're going to see interior lighting right over here, and that is accompanied into the door handle as well. Since it's light out, I can't really show it to its perfect level, even though I am in a garage. Overall, pretty solid infotainment system. A lot cleaner and modern looking than the newer MBUX systems. Drive selector, it has the M logo imprinted on it. You're gonna be wondering what this is. This changes the aggressiveness of each of the shifts. Let me repeat that. It changes the aggressiveness of the shifts. So whether you're changing up or changing down gear, it will be more or less aggressive based on which mode you have selected on here. We also have the M mode, the setup for the M mode, and the active exhaust button. So if I click that off, turn the exhaust off, and turns it back on. We have carbon fiber dash, which is perfect. One good look at these bucket seats, which has the M stitching right over here, so blue and then red on the inside, which I love. Overall, this is a really nice interior. No sunroof, because this has the carbon fiber roof. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Let's get on with a drive. Here we are driving the 2024 BMW M2. Not going to beat on the car at all. I had 112 miles on it while filming, so we don't want to keep that to a minimum. Yes, that is correct. You heard the turn signal, which is interesting because we are in a BMW M2, but the law is indeed the law, especially in Texas. Now, one thing that I noticed right off the bat, just first drive, is that the suspension is really stiff, especially when it's dampening. The stiffness really gets to you, especially when you're in a sports seat. But you know, just cruising around in even comfort mode, there's pretty much the whole drive was just in comfort mode, not touching any of the M1 or M2 buttons. It's really stiff and sometimes harsh at times, especially with these carbon bucket seats that are pretty much on the floor. Now, wind noise isn't as bad, same with tire noise, and engine noise does slightly come through, but that's really only when you put some power down. Again, since the car hasn't been broken in whatsoever, it has a 1500 mile braking period. At 112 miles, you really just want to feather the throttle everywhere and not push it, so that's exactly what we did on this drive. Really want to make sure that, you know, all the fluids are getting to where they need to be and all the gaskets are settling in properly. But in terms of driving dynamics, the steering is dialed in very sharply, and I've heard that this thing is really easy to kick out from one of my other friends that also has an M2. But in terms of driving dynamics, this thing is great. Now we are into the competition section of the video, and I will be comparing the M2 technically base, to the 2025 Mercedes-AMG CLE 53. The reason I'm not comparing this to the C63S anymore is because, one, it's not a two-door, it doesn't come in a two-door anymore, and two, it's really just an M3 competitor, especially at 684 horsepower, however much this has. This has the revised M256 3-liter single-turbo inline-six motor. This produces in the wheelhouse of around 530-ish horsepower. All-wheel drive drivetrain in any variant you get, so there is that, and you are only limited to the 9G Tronic MCT, which means that there's no manual option, unlike the BMW M2, which does give you a manual option. But in terms of power and, you know, styling, wheelbase, size, style, and overall just the way the car looks and handles, right up the alley with the BMW M2, although this will run you about 10 to 15 grand more because these are selling for around 84,000. The big distinction is that there is no smaller AMG or bigger AMG variant of the CLE. It's the CLE 300 and then the 450 and then the 53. So definitely a larger step up from the CLE 450 to the CLE 53. And this is important because there's less distinction between the M240i and the M2, because the CLE gets a wide body, different wheels, aggressive hood, different lower portions, and different interior features as well as a quad exhaust. So I mean, the CLE is a step up from its base, but at the same time, I'd still find myself taking the BMW. Now we have the 2025 Dark Horse Mustang. This is an oddball, but hear me out on this. Now you can spec the Dark Horse Mustang either with the 10R80 10-speed automatic, or you can get an MT82 in this, which is better than the previous manual they had. Now, yes, you do get an automatic and a manual option, just like the M2. You get a 5-liter naturally aspirated V8 with the Dark Horse Mustang. It's also only rear-wheel drive, which is great. 500 horsepower out of this thing, so a little bit more horsepower than the M2, but has a little bit more trouble putting its power down because, you know, it's a Mustang. It's also, the interior quality is a little bit lackluster compared to that of the M2. I'm only having these two competitors because that's what I think is fair. I don't want to compare it to the Super because the Super has a B58, about 100 horsepower down from the M2, and it's just, I don't know, it's a different car in my opinion, like a lower, less premium sports car. Now, I could compare this to the 718 Cayman, but I'm not going to because in base form, it just doesn't match up. And when you spec it out, it's going to be like 100 grand. And at that point, just it doesn't make sense to buy a 718 Cayman compared to how capable a Porsche or how capable the BMW M2 is just right out of the box, even if you'd had no options on it whatsoever. So I'd say these two cars are the most comparable. I would, just to be different, honestly, I might take the Dark Horse Mustang. You know, long tube headers, no catalytic converters, no mufflers, just straight through and just make everyone mad. At the start of the video, I said why would I get this, or I said that I would explain why I'd get this over an M3 or M4 competition, more specifically the M4 competition. The thing is, it's got the same motor, it's got the same transmission, and it's also rear-wheel drive. This also comes with a speccable 6-speed manual transmission option, which the M4 competition doesn't. You have to get an M3 base, not even a competition. So, based on those factors alone, it makes sense why I'd like this more. Another thing I like more is that the wheelbase is shorter. More shorter wheelbase means more input and output based on my input from the steering into the driving, just the way the car drives overall. I also prefer the way this car looks. I think it looks 10 times better. Moving into the price, for around $20,000 less than an M4, you can get this. And this is better. It also has a carbon roof, because who doesn't want a carbon roof? Now, yeah, $68,000, $72,000 around that threshold, that's a lot of money for a sports car. But when you're getting this car, every single dollar is worth it. That is all for today. Big thank you to my friend for actually letting me review this vehicle, especially in this heat. Remember to keep on driving, and please do consider subscribing as well, because that's important.